Now, this is interesting. He says that, let me read you a few sayings only, which you may hear repeated often in India, village life. Then after the heat of the day, the old and the young assemble together under the shadow of their village tree. Sayings which to them seem truth to us, truisms, some wise words. According to the Veda, the soul or life, in brackets he writes, is eternal, but the body of all creatures is perishable. When the body is destroyed, the soul departs elsewhere, fettered by the bonds of our works. As a man puts on new garments in this world, throwing aside those which he formerly wore, even so the self of a man puts on new bodies which are in accordance with his acts. No weapons will hurt the self of man, no fire will burn it, no water moisten it, no wind will dry it up. Namaskar, welcome to another episode of my series with you, Doing the Right Things. In this, as I've shared with you before, I share with you my learnings in life, my interactions with some great minds and some great books, and what I learn from them. And so the idea is to share it with you and learn along with you, share that you learn as well. हमने मैक्स मिलर के बारे में बहुत कुछ सुना है कि बहुत ही बेकार आदमी था, आर्यन इन्वेजन थियरी उसने दी, वेदों को अभी से 1500 BC पे डेट किया, ये बोला कि इंडो यूरोपियन लैंग्वेजेस कोई थी और उससे संस्कृत निकली है इंस्टेड ऑफ द अदर वे अराउंड एंड सो एंड सो फोर्थ. कुछ स्टेटमेंट्स मेरे सामने हैं उसकी, मैक्स मिलर की लेटर्स को काफ़ी कोट किया जाता है. तो यहाँ पर एक है कि टू द डीन ऑफ सेंट पॉल्स स्टाउटन हाउस Bournemouth on February 26, 1867, he wrote, I have myself the strongest belief in the growth of Christianity in India. There is no country so ripe for Christianity as India, and yet the difficulties seem enormous. He wrote to his wife, supposedly, and he writes, it took only 200 years for us to Christianize the whole of Africa, but even after 400 years, India eludes us. I have come to realize that it is Sanskrit which has enabled India to do so, to remain so it means, and to break it, I have decided to learn Sanskrit. So, unquote. So his motives are sort of pretty clearly captured कि उसको भारत को क्रिश्चियनाइज करना था, वो भारत को एकदम तुच्छ प्राणी की तरह वाइट मैन्स बर्डन कैरी कर कर उस तरह से ट्रीट करता था कि हम सैवेजेस हैं, अनसिविलाइज्ड हैं, और वो वेस्टर्न थिंकिंग, वेस्टर्न वाइट मैन हमारे पास सिविलाइजेशन लेकर आ रहा है. सो इसी चेयर पर बैठकर प्रोफेसर कपिल कपूर, जो मेरे लिए आदरणीय है, पूजनीय है, गुरु की तरह है, उन्होंने इसी रूम से बाहर निकल एक बार मुझे बोला यही बात कि हम मैक्स मिलर को के बारे में बहुत कुछ बोलते हैं, बट ही हैज़ हैड रिटन अ वंडरफुल बुक कॉल्ड इंडिया व्हाट इट कैन टीच अस. तो मैंने एकदम जाके वो बुक खरीदी, और ऐसे ही जैसे मैंने पहले भी बताया आप सबको, मैं बहुत ज़्यादा पढ़ता नहीं हूँ, बट कहीं पर थोड़ी बहुत बुक खोल लेता हूँ. तो एक उनका लेक्चर 3 इस बुक में, व्हाट इंडिया व्हाट इट कैन टीच अस, इसमें एक लेक्चर 3 है. तो वो पेज में खुला, और फिर मैंने बहुत सारे स्टिकीज लगाए हुए हैं आप सबके साथ शेयर करने के लिए, कुछ कोट्स फ्रॉम दिस बुक, एंड आई encourage you to read this. So this gives another aspect of Max Müller, and honestly I'm not able to reconcile the man. एक तरफ जो आप सुनेंगे as I take you through what he's written, और दूसरी तरफ a man who's trying to Christianize India and break India and break Sanskrit and break Brahmins so that India can be Christianized and civilized and so on and so forth. बहुत दुविधा है, but I'm going to share all of this with you because maybe this is another aspect of another person. I don't know if this book was written first and the letters were written first. I'm not sure. Maybe the man changed. I have no idea. but I'd like to share. So in lecture 3, this is page 57 of this book. I'm going to read a few excerpts for you, and across about 15 pages, but a few excerpts. He's given this lecture, he's giving this for civil servants who are going to be coming into India from England to rule over us. And he writes, my second lecture, or he says, he's lecturing, and so this is a compilation of his lectures. He writes, my second lecture was directed against another prejudice, namely that the people of India, with whom the young civil servants will have to pass the best years of their life, are a race so depraved morally, and more particularly so devoid of any regard for truth, that they must always remain strangers to us, and that any real fellowship or friendship with them is quite out of the question. So he's basically saying in his second lecture, which I have not read, he's challenging this notion, and in this lecture he writes that he's going to grapple with the prejudice against Sanskrit literature. So there's a lot of Sanskrit. He talks about how Sanskrit is so widespread, how different pandits from any part of the country, from Tamil Nadu to Banaras, to Bengal, wherever he meets them, they are exchanging ideas in Sanskrit, how journals are published in Sanskrit, how they communicate with each other in Sanskrit over any other language, and so on and so forth. And so, I'm going to skip all of that and keep that for another session with all of you, sharing with all of you, because those are very, very valuable and tells us a lot about late 1800s, middle to late 1800s, India, and how Sanskrit was prevalent and so on and so forth. But today I just want to talk about some of his ideas and what was he grappling with, what was he trying to tell civil servants coming from England into India, and just share another aspect of this often demonized man with you. Another excerpt is on page 61. He writes, any candidate who knows but the elements of Sanskrit grammar will well understand what I mean, whether his special vernacular may be Bengali, Hindustani, or even Tamil. To a classical scholar, I can only say that between a civil servant who knows Sanskrit and Hindustani and another who knows Hindustani only, there is about the same difference in their power of forming an intelligent appreciation of India and its inhabitants as there is between a traveller who visits Italy with knowledge of Latin and a party personally conducted to Rome by Messrs. Cook and Company. So, simple but explain करता हूँ हिंदी में कि अगर कोई सिविल सर्वेंट संस्कृत और हिंदुस्तानी दोनों जानता है और दूसरा केवल हिंदुस्तानी जानता है, तो उनकी ability to form an opinion about India and Hindus, inhabitants, I'm sure there are Muslims as well, but he's basically talking Sanskrit and culture and all of that, which is not Islamic in India, it is Hindu. So India, Indians and Hindus, he says, is like a traveler जो Italy जा रहा है with knowledge of Latin, and so the ability of this person to appreciate Italy, its architecture and history and art and so on and so forth will be of a totally different grade than a person जो किसी ट्रैवल कंपनी, कुक एंड कंपनी, टॉमस कुक जैसी कंपनी के साथ जो ट्रैवल कर रहा है. तो उन दोनों में जो अंतर होता है वही अंतर होगा अगर कोई सिविल सर्वेंट संस्कृत और हिंदुस्तानी समझेगा और जो केवल हिंदुस्तानी समझेगा. ब्यूटिफुली कैप्चर्ड. In another excerpt on page 62, he says, if the Vedas, such as we now have them, were composed about 1500 BC, and if it is a fact that considerable works continue to be written in Sanskrit even now, we have before us a stream of literary activity extending over 3000 years, 3400 years. With the exception of China, there is nothing like this in the whole world. So you see, he's actually appreciative of this. he is recognizing that this is not something that even them in the Western world, in England, have achieved. Barring China, there is nothing like this that the world has seen. He is recognizing that. I'll move on, skip maybe a few pages and come to another excerpt. Very beautiful. This is on page 66. He says that literature opens us to a chapter in what has been called the education of the human race, to which we can find no parallel anywhere else. Whoever cares for the historical growth of our language, that is, of our thoughts, whoever cares for the first intelligible development of religion and mythology, he is not talking about England only, or only Western thought and ideals and all. He is talking about as a human race. I repeat, that literature opens to us a chapter in what has been called the education of the human race. Yeah, so he's not talking about England and only limited to that. Whoever cares for this historical growth of our language, that is, of our thoughts, whoever cares for the first intelligible development of religion and mythology, whoever cares for the first foundation of what in later times we call the sciences of astronomy, metronomy, grammar and etymology, whoever cares for the first intimations of philosophical thought, for the first attempts at regulating family life, village life and state life, as founded on religion, ceremonial tradition and contract, must in future pay the same attention to the literature of the Vedic period as to the literatures of Greece and Rome and Germany. So at the bare minimum, he is saying that the literatures of Vedic period are no less than Greece, Rome or whatever it is in Germany. Okay, so he is not looking down upon India and Hindus as a depraved race and morally low and all of that. You know, he's actually challenging that. He's telling civil servants that they are equal to us. In some cases, he's actually saying that the literature is unparalleled other than China. He goes on. Now, this is interesting. He says that, let me read you a few sayings only, which you may hear repeated often in India. When he goes on to describe village life, then after the heat of the day, the old and the young assemble together under the shadow of their village tree. Sayings which to them seem truth to us. Yeah. So he talks about some of these truisms, some of these discussions that that villagers have under a peepal tree, and he's captured some of them here. Truisms, some wise words. According to the Veda, the soul or life, in brackets he writes, is eternal, but the body of all creatures is perishable. When the body is destroyed, the soul departs elsewhere, fettered by the bonds of our works. As a man puts on new garments in this world, throwing aside those which he formerly wore, even so the self of a man puts on new bodies which are in accordance with his acts. No weapons will hurt the self of man, no fire will burn it, no water moisten it, no wind will dry it up. He's talking shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita, translating on his own. There are many more of them. As all have to sleep together, laid low in earth, why do foolish people which wish to injure one another? And many other truisms like this. Despising everything else, a wise man should strive after the knowledge of the self, the higher self. So he is actually picking up some of the grandest ideas that Hindu Dharma, Sanatan Dharma, this land, India, Hindus have produced. He's picking on that. So he's not, and he's appreciative of that. So he's not looking down upon us saying that we have one true God and you have all these gods. He's not saying any of that here. He goes on to say something really beautiful, which a lot of people do not understand. And in middle 1800s, late 1800s, this man, Max Müller, was understanding that. Very powerful. He says, now let us look to the ancient inhabitants of India. With them, first of all, religion was not only one interest by the side of many. It was an all-absorbing interest. It embraced not only worship and prayer, but what we call philosophy, morality, law, and government. All was pervaded by religion. Their whole life was to them a religion. Everything else was, as it were, a mere concession made to the ephemeral requirements of this life. Beautiful, beautiful. He is saying Hindus के लिए सब कुछ ही ये धर्म है, ये रिलीजन है. उनका धर्म केवल मंदिर में पूजाएं करने में तक लिमिटेड नहीं है. वो रिलीजन उनकी फिलॉसफी, उनके लॉज ऑफ मोरालिटी, उनकी लॉ में, उनकी गवर्नमेंट में, उनकी साइंसेस में, all aspects of life, all aspects are pervaded by religion. उसमें हर जगह there is pervasiveness of religion, of this idea. He says religion because we don't have a word for religion in Hinduism. We just say dharma, and because so dharma expands across all our lives, right? And he goes on to say that everything else, whatever is left outside of philosophy, government, morality, law, wealth earning, whatever, is a mere concession made to ephemeral requirements of this life. As if कुछ छोटी मोटी requirements of life हैं उनके लिए, बाकी everything is absorbed by dharma. What a beautiful insight this man has, and what a sad state that today's people, today's intellectuals, leaders are unable to understand that to a Hindu there is no difference between science and religion. हमारी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन हमारे को ज्ञान बांटती है कि हमारे को साइंटिफिक होना चाहिए, हमारे को अपनी इंटेलिजेंस, साइंटिफिक एक्यूमेंट डेवलप करना चाहिए, rationality डेवलप करनी चाहिए, as if to say that all these ideas of religion जो हिंदू धर्म ने, जो इस समाज ने, भारतीयता ने हमें सिखाया है, is below the grade. It's no different from, in an earlier episode I'd shared with you how leftist historians R.S. Sharma and D.N. Jha really look down upon Indians, as if कि तुम बड़े ग्रेट रहे होगे मगर अब अपनी ग्रेटनेस पे ज़्यादा उछलो कूदो मत, तुम अभी बिल्कुल ही तुच्छ हो बाकी दुनिया की साइंस और प्रोग्रेस के सामने. And this is how the constitution also unfortunately looks at us, right? And that's the guiding light supposedly of our nation, to which Modiji अपना सर झुकाते हैं as if मंदिर में जा रहे हैं. सॉरी मोदी जी, आपको बहुत प्रेम करता हूँ मगर कभी कभी ऐसी चीज़ों पे थोड़ी कटु शब्द बोलता हूँ, मगर क्षमा कीजिएगा. वापस आते हैं मैक्स मिलर पे, अगले एक पैराग्राफ पर. थोड़ा इमोशनल हो गया मैं इस ब्यूटीफुल इंसाइट के ऊपर कि all aspects of a Hindu's life are pervaded by religion. There's no difference between science and religion, no difference between art and religion. It is dharma which pervades into arts, into sciences, into what would be called secular education, mathematics and science and accounts and whatever. Brilliant. He goes on to say in page 80, and this is a concluding paragraphs, and this is also very beautiful, so I thought I'll conclude with this. What then is to be done, he writes. We must simply keep a preconceived notion of what people call primitive humanity in abeyance for a time. He's basically saying, ये जो हमारे preconceived notion है उनको please side में रख दो. He's telling the civil servants coming from England coming to India. And if we find that people 3,000 years ago were familiar with ideas that seem novel and 19th century like to us, well, we must somewhat modify our conceptions of the primitive savage and remember that things hid from the wise and prudent have sometimes been revealed to babies. I maintain then that that for a study of man, or if you like, for a study of Aryan humanity, he had an Aryan notion, let's accept that, there is nothing in the world equal in importance with the Veda. I maintain that to everybody who cares for himself, for his ancestors, for his history, for his intellectual development, अंग्रेजों को बोल रहा है, याद रखिए, अंग्रेजों को बोल रहा है, civil servants को. I maintain that to everybody who cares for himself, for his ancestors, for his history, or for his intellectual development, a study of Vedic literature is indispensable. And that as an element of liberal education, it is far more important and far more improving than the reigns of Babylonian and Persian kings. Even than the dates and deeds of many kings of the Judah and Israel. सबसे important study of Veda को दे रहा है. जिस historicity से, जिस history से of Judah and Israel जिससे वो आया है, उससे भी ऊपर उनको रख रहा है. Beautiful. So another aspect of Max Müller which we did not know, I would recommend you buy this book, What It Can Teach Us by Frederick Max Müller. सस्ती 200-300 रुपए की किताब है, Amazon पे available है. Wonderful, lovely interacting with you. Hopefully you enjoyed this session. Namaskar, Jai Hind.